Hello, today's Multiplayer Monday. So we are going to talk about networking stuff. Today specifically, we're going to talk about, as a follow-up to the last, is authentication with Photon voice. So if you're using voice chat, which is more common now, and it's a lot easier to use than typing. So this is specifically with authentication, but also how to manipulate Photon voice at runtime, because oftentimes Photon voice does a lot of things by default, and when you want to do something custom or specific, it's really hard to find information. And so today I'm going to go over just really quick on the voice. So we have this voice and run or runner and voice. Usually you get a default prefab that shows you, it's just basically Fusion voice client added to the network runner. And so you spawn this, and by default, it connects and it does everything. So how does it work? Well, it has these settings. Here we have a Fusion app setting. So this is specifically for Fusion. When you download Photon voice from the App Store, it will have the prefab that it needs for the connection that you need. So for example, if you're using Pun, it will have a prefab for Pun. If you're using Quantum, there's specific for Quantum, a way to do that. And then there's also Fusion Voice Client. And so whatever you're using from Photon, they have a prefab for it and a demo to show you how to use it. Okay. So with Fusion specifically, there's these app settings. So this uses the app settings by default. This is the authentication values. So this is specifically from when you authenticate. Okay, and that's what we're going to talk about. And then auto connect and join. Okay, so by default, this all works right out of the gate. But what happens, for example, in the previous episode, we talked about authenticating from Meta, the Oculus authentication. And the Oculus authentication requires a nonce, which is a one-time unique ID. And because of that, it can't be used twice. So what happens is that Photon Fusion connects using that, and Oculus authenticates, and it's fine. But when you connect again with Fusion voice, now it's not the same connection. And so you need to connect again. And that's where you need to make sure that we are authenticating twice. So I'm going to show you that first. We're going to go back in here where we connect. And this is where we left off last time. We have connection. And here, if we're using authentication, we're going to get the user proof. And then when we're done with that, we're going to connect without authentication. And if all that goes well, we're going to connect. We're going to now initiate the voice chat. And with the voice chat, we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to get the nonce from Meta, and then use the Oculus nonce and connect again. Now, with the voice client, in order to get this to work, you have to make sure that in here, in this runner, check these off. So what this is going to do is going to keep these settings, so you don't have to do it again. These Fusion app settings that you have are going to stay the same. The only difference is that it's not going to connect by default, and it's not going to use the authentication values, because you don't want it to use the same authentication value. You want it to use the new nonce that you got for the voice chat. So you're going to have to do this twice if you're using voice chat. Okay. And then what happens is you have this voice client, right? And how did we get this? So what happens is the runner has a component called Fusion Voice Client. So as long as you can grab the runner, you can get component Fusion Voice Client, and that's your voice client. And in that, you have client.authorization values. Okay. So that's your authentication. You have the values. You have the new nonce. Okay. So they're there. Now you run this function called connect and join room. And if it's true, it will connect. And what this does, it will use these values to try to connect. Okay, so this is the same voice client. Okay, this is the key, these two things, because I couldn't find, there's a lot of documentation about, in general, these things, but you can't, it was really hard to figure out which one it is. And hindsight, now you can see that this is obvious. It'll connect and join the room. But I was testing in here to see if I needed these app settings. But again, I didn't need these settings, like a voice server. I didn't need to do any of this because it's already there. Okay, so this you can comment out, and you don't need any of this. So this can be commented out. I won't need any of that, because in here, like I showed you before, these settings carry across, and I tested that to make sure that this was correct, and it does work. Okay, the thing is, this can't be tested in the editor, because again, with Oculus, this is to counteract those that are playing on PC and make sure that you're playing from a headset. Okay, so again, this is a connection. And the cool thing is that, let's say you wanted to do something different, like maybe you only want to enable voice chat in a specific room or in a specific game mode. Let's say you don't want voice chat to work in another game mode or in a lobby because you don't want people talking. You can just not connect to the room, right? You just remove these settings and it will not connect. It'll just sit there and it won't waste bandwidth. That's why usually you have two apps, one app ID for the voice and one app ID for Fusion, because you're connecting to the same servers. Fusion Photon has all that figured out in the backend. But the main thing is that now you have access to this and you can do it on your own terms. Okay, so you can authenticate and connect to what you need to, and also when you want to. Okay, with this voice client, connect and join room. Okay, and the way I have in the connections in here, I spawn in here. Let me show you. When I start the game, I set up all these things, and here I instantiate the runner voice prefab. Okay, and I do it as a child of this transform, so it's underneath here, and then it'll give the name and then the runner. I say, hey, this is the runner. And so that way I have a reference to it. And if I need to, I'll get the voice client and do whatever I need to. You can always add callbacks. But the main thing with this is that now you have complete control of your Fusion voice client. Okay. And if you need it for pun or other things, it's similar. You just need to make sure that you grab the prefab and have the appropriate settings. And it's pretty straightforward. Next week, what we're going to go over is I'm going to go, since we're here in the voice client, we're going to talk about voice chat, because I seen a lot of like muting and how to find the players and how to keep track of everyone in the room. And we're gonna start going over those things and settings so that we can learn how to mute players, how to see if they're speaking, how to be able to filter that so that it's not always on by default, and figure out different things with that. And we'll see you next week for another Multiplayer Monday.